Hola, bueno, muchas gracias, Ana Belén, por las intros. Thank you for the panelists, of course, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm obviously part of Epika, so I'm talking here not only on a personal level, but also on behalf of the organization. We were very happy to see so many people in here after lunch, so thank you all as well for being here, and I hope you're enjoying. Well, with that said, it seems obvious to me that there is quite a lot of people in here, even though it's 4 p.m. in the afternoon, because the topic at hand it's quite exciting. We've had quite a few panels discussing artificial intelligence this morning, and so it's obvious to me that there is quite a lot of excitement about this. When they asked me to moderate this panel, I did what everyone would do, is I went and asked ChatGPT. So you can see in here what happened. Quite a straightforward command. I just asked him, like, what's the best way to invest in artificial intelligence? And as you can see, in a matter of seconds, you have a bazillion ways of doing this. But it's obviously what stand out to me was that A, there's a lack of context in here, and B, obviously, as you can see in the very end of it, it says that before making any investment decision, it is essential to conduct thorough research. And that's what we're here for, basically, to contextualize this industry and this movement, so to say, and to see what we should and we shouldn't to maximize the potential of our investments. So to start with that, I would like to ask you, Rolando, to start with, well, basically, how did we get here? How did we get in the last year from not knowing what AI was to having this panel, basically?
Yes, of course. Thank you, and hello, everybody. So what happened, right? So first of all, I want to demystify something. AI is not new. Everybody just seems to realize that artificial intelligence just happened last year than this year, but AI has been in development for many, many decades. So it's first of all to contextualize that artificial intelligence is not a new technology, but it is a technology that is evolving. And the pace at which it has been developed, it is evolving, has been accelerating. And I think that's a key point. I also think that when we are going to look back on history and say, what was the inflection point, right? Because most technologies have an inflection point that creates massive adoption, broad development. And I think we're going to reflect, looking back into what happened in history, to a single date, which was November 2022 and ChatGPT. So we saw the example here, when you were asking, hey, how do you invest in artificial intelligence? But what's really important, more than the answer, is that finally, artificial intelligence has gotten out of the wood, getting in front of everybody, and having massive adoption. Just look at the numbers, right? ChatGPT, in less than a couple of months, I think it was 2 months, it got to 500 million users on the platform. It has been the fastest growing application ever made in history. Previous technologies, like the internet, took 1 decade to get to the first 500 million users. So it's a very, very fast evolving technology. But your question, Ulises, was what happened? And for me, it was really the alignment of planets. Data, which is more than the oil of the 21st century, is the oxygen. Everything evolves around data. And data is being generated every day in all our activities. Here, enterprises developed it. And actually, most companies today are not using all the data they generate. Only about 10%. So we got data, we have computing power growing exponentially, thanks to companies today, it's NVIDIA, in the past it was companies like Intel, AMD, so computing power and the cloud are evolving, so we got that as well. Artificial intelligence, I mentioned at the exponential development. Do you know that the neural networks that actually make the artificial intelligence algorithms are growing in size? They're doubling every 2 months. So it's an exponential pace of development. So you have exponential growth in data. You have penetration in cloud and exponential growth in computing power. You have exponential growth in the size of the neural networks. So of course you're going to have mass applications. We got what the killer app, ChatGPT. Now it's a race that is just starting. There are geopolitical implications, economical implications, stock market investment, social implications. So it's really a revolution that is just beginning. So yes, the answer, what happened? Well, technology just continues to evolve, and everything is put in place so that this technology will become real and ever more powerful.
Thank you, Rolando, for that. So, well, you touched on a very different few subjects, but as you mentioned, there's the alignment of planets, and there were many different factors that got involved into this explosion of artificial intelligence. So, considering that diverse variety of factors, Johannes, I would like to go to you to ask, well, there is a diversity of factors that participated on this explosion, but how is this explosion impacting different sectors? How is it changing economy, jobs, and most of all, are you worried or excited about it?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me today. Great pleasure also seeing the huge audience here. Yeah, AI, or speaking about AI, is very much topical these days, and specifically, as you rightly pointed out, this year in particular. I could probably, add something on what you said earlier. What is one of these inflection points, and where and why do we see the inflection points? I guess is also after looking back and being part of this AI investment community, I could say, for the last 6-7 years when we have launched our fund. I think it's clearly also the willingness to invest in the industry overall. So a technology breakthrough on the one side, but we also have seen more and more investors coming to the market, which definitely has also put more oil to the fire. Speaking about risks and regulations and ethical concerns and so on and so forth, what you just asked me, I think this is also, which was for always, I mean, if I look back for the last 10 years, always there have been people, have raised concerns in terms of what will it mean to us, will I eventually lose my job, for example, or stuff like that. So our general belief is we rather focusing on the positive side, on the opportunities. Societies always have changed over the course of the last 100, 200 years. If you just think about the Spanish economy, or speaking about the biggest economy, the US, 100 years ago, 95% of the economy have been focusing on the agriculture sector. Nowadays, it's exactly the opposite. It's less than 5%. So do we have more unemployment? No, certainly not. We have just changed and developed further. Of course, we do need ethical boundaries, and also we need to have a discussion. So that's not a bad thing overall. But first of all, I would rather focusing on the opportunities what we have with all this new technology.
You did mention that, both of you mentioned the exponential growth that there has been in artificial intelligence, and you also mentioned, obviously, you'd like to focus on the opportunities ahead, and we'll get to that. But just before we get to that, I would like to ask you, Johannes, obviously, this growth and this changing landscape, the last time we probably saw that was in the dot-com bubble and how the internet changed everything, basically. So I don't know if you could explain a little bit if you see any similarities, or it doesn't have anything to do at all with what we saw. Well, I didn't see it that much, but
yeah, actually, I think this morning actually I showed this chart about the dot-com bubble because I think that example is very relevant. Obviously, we are talking about something that is so big and so transformative that we have to open the history book and go back in the history of humanity and think, when was the last time that we had something as big as this? And maybe just come back before we get too excited, because I think we're just getting started. The dot-com bubble is the end, right? But I'll tell you what I think about that is I don't think that this is a bubble at all at the moment. Famous last words, NVIDIA is just reporting tonight, so I don't have wood to touch. But I think it's important to just come back, maybe rewind on how did we come here, and I like the history that we just heard, that all the stars get aligned and all of a sudden we've got boom, a jump. I think it always is like that. I mean, the inflection point and the science of getting right that inflection point is you can't get right that inflection point. You can't. But essentially what happens all the time is that these things go gradually and then boom, all of a sudden. And that's what we had. And don't you think that we just stop with this kind of thing, ChatGPT-4 and ChatGPT Turbo, and that modality is just the beginning? We're just getting started. I mean, can you think of any application today that is not going to be transformed by an LLM at the face of it? I can't. You know, take any website, any digital thing. It's like you want to put an LLM in front of it. And I think that's where we're heading, so we're just getting started. So we're going to start asking a question about the dot-com bubble. We're going to get a little bit ahead of ourselves, and it's a little bit premature. So back to your question, is this a dot-com bubble? So this morning in the keynote session, I was showing this chart, comparing it to the internet, rightly so. That was the last revolution we saw in our lifetime. And then the poster child, obviously, of the internet bubble was Cisco. And typically, when you've got something as transformational as what we're living today, it's not a one-quarter journey. It's not, you know, NVIDIA beats numbers by 50% in 1 quarter. Typically, it's 8 years. Yeah, if you're going to roll out and accelerate data centers around the globe, it's not going to be done in 2023 or 2024. It will take time. So if you plot NVIDIA's chart today on Cisco's chart back in the 2000s, you'll see that you need a microscope to see it, because typically stocks don't do multiplied by 2 and we're done. They do multiplied by 100. You know, I'm not saying, you know, NVIDIA is going to multiply by 100, please. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying between multiplied by 2 and multiplied by 100, you have a margin. And between, you know, NVIDIA's beating earnings in 2 quarters in a row, and NVIDIA is going to deploy and accelerate data centers for the next 8 years, you've got a margin. And again, you know, well, I don't know what NVIDIA is going to report tonight, but I don't think the story ends in this quarter or next or the one after. So that's my answer to the bubbles. Yeah.
I think that's all. It's all clear. So I think it's. Yeah, go ahead.
I could add something here. Just by observing the market, I think this was to some extent also what you said, but to us it was really a surprise, because we received this question all the time in terms of, is it too late to invest? For example, specifically after successful time periods like this year, for example. Also, the great difference between 25 years ago is probably also that most of the business models what we see nowadays being successful already, being, you know, there is a stable cash flow generation business model behind the scenes, which wasn't the case 25 years or 24 years ago. It was completely different. So I think if you talk about valuation bubbles and the concern and the risk of investing in the current markets, of course you do have outliers, long duration assets, highly leveraged. These companies now feel the headwinds right now with, you know, refinancing becoming increasingly a problem or a challenge, yes, no doubt. But in general, the market seems to be much more healthier compared to 24 years.
Yeah, I agree, especially in Europe. We don't have those loss-making.
We'll get to Europe in that point, yeah. But let me just first, before that, just ask you on, because you have set up the context, and it seems pretty clear to me that, yeah, well, it is not a bubble, and it's quite an opportunity. So then, that's, I guess, the easiest question for you now there, which is, well, the easiest or the most complicated, depending on how you see it. But how do we identify those winners? How do we pick and choose where to invest and how to compose that portfolio?
Okay, thank you. That's a very important question and very legitimate, especially for you as investment professionals. Let me just start by saying one thing. The reason we're here today is that artificial intelligence, in our opinion, and I believe it's shared by many of us here, is something that will have a huge impact on every sector, virtually every sector on the planet, so not just tech. And that means that for us, as fund managers, that means we have to look for companies not only in the tech sectors, but also in other sectors that have nothing to do with tech, but that can bring artificial intelligence on board in order to produce goods and services more efficiently, and of course, to produce goods that are less expensive. And that's a real challenge. So I'm not speaking on behalf of my colleagues, but let me tell you how we do that at ODDO BHF Asset Management. And at the heart of the process to pick up those winners, we have 2 portfolio managers who have very different backgrounds. One is more coming from the technical side, he's an engineer. The other one is more an expert in the financial markets. And we need that kind of basically various backgrounds in order to challenge each other. And as I said, in order to find new ideas across all sectors. Second, they both, those PMs, look at the investable universe, which is probably something like 6,000 stocks. So that's a lot across the planet, across every industry. It's of course much too big for anyone as a human being. So what we have done is that we have a number of tools to assist us in our asset management process. But we have in particular an artificial intelligence tool. So we use AI to invest in AI. We use artificial intelligence to look for and detect and find interesting ideas that are relevant to artificial intelligence. We do that by basically having a natural language processing tool that scrolls millions of documents to find companies that are actively doing something, either building the technologies or the building blocks of artificial intelligence without which AI will not flourish, but also the ones that are basically integrating AI into their investment process in order, as I said, to get an early start and to get the lead ahead of the competitors. So that's a way, with this AI tool, a way to reduce the investable universe to something that's more manageable. And then we've got other tools, of course, a quant tool, like a multi-factor quantitative tool, in order to, of course, as well, look for the company that have low valuation, that are interesting from a financial perspective. We also use and include ESG criteria. And at the end of this process, the investment universe is much further reduced. And then the PMs, the human portfolio managers, who at the end of the day are the only one managing the fund, only one taking the sell and buy decisions, those guys can then take this restricted subset and proceed with a fundamental analysis to check the companies that are really relevant to the thematic, that are really interesting from both a thematic and also a financial perspective. In other words, we're trying to assess the analytic power of AI in order to also find out the smaller companies, the companies active in a very remote land, the one that the market has not yet identified as relevant, as active in artificial intelligence, and include, of course, companies which are not well covered by financial analysis. This is the way we do it. I'm not saying it's the only way. This is a way that is something that we've done for 5 years, and we're very pleased with that.
Well, as you mentioned, this might not be the only way, and I'm quite a fan of this back and forth that we're having, because in here at the end they want to hear you. So actually I was curious, Johannes, we'll go with you and then you can intervene, Anis, and then Rolando, to see whether you agree or what's your perspective and your way of investing in artificial intelligence. Like, Johannes, you can start if you want. If you want to give us a perspective of how you identify, or if you have a similar perspective, or what differentiates your strategy in this sense?
On how to invest in AI, I mean, it has been a thought process internally when we came up with our fund idea 6-7 years ago. Right at the beginning, we came to a conclusion, and it's very interesting actually that now we also have the feeling that we talk so much about tech, but investing in AI means so much more. In fact, it's not only the technology side, the supply side is also the demand side, because it has a massive impact on companies, other sectors outside of technology. And this is what we have identified from the early innings already. So our standard approach is definitely cutting the market in 3 areas. The first area we call AI infrastructure, typically the whole building block to companies you need to build up the AI ecosystem, mostly semiconductor companies and software companies to some extent, as well as also AI application with specifically software companies offering additional service to industries outside. So this is really, in a nutshell, the technology part of our understanding and how to invest in AI. But there is also, in fact, a third area, a third bucket, and this is basically everything which is outside of technology. Can be all different sectors, can be healthcare sectors, and we have seen great impact, especially during the pandemic. Moderna, BioNTech, for example. We see it even in agriculture, for example, with John Deere increasingly also building up and building building out their AI competence. We have seen it also lately with our other areas in the industrial companies, really old-fashioned companies, but realizing leveraging AI can have a massive business impact going forward in order to fight better for margins and be more successful and ahead of the market.
That's great. Rolando, I would like to give us your take on that, but because he's mentioned that like expanding farther than tech, while you give us your take, I would like to know also that even though we can expand from tech, there is an obvious weight in portfolios of the Magnificent Seven and the massive companies that are, well, NVIDIA, as he mentioned, or Microsoft, or any others. So while you give us your take, I would also like to hear what's the weight that you would put in all those companies, because obviously they are the front face of AI in a way.
Right. So, okay, so maybe let's begin into the fund, the process. So in our case, it's very similar things. So for example, we also have natural language processing. I mean, today it helps so much. You have so much data. We are in an abundance of data. So you need tools to try to help you understand, find the companies that speak about AI. So we do that. We have a similar approach as Allianz at La Financière de Echiquier. We have also created a mapping of the companies in the AI ecosystem, because you have companies vending, selling the artificial intelligence technology, companies that buy. I mean, examples, you mentioned healthcare, you mentioned companies in agriculture on which were invested, because AI is a universal technology. Every sector is going to use it. So we have to invest in both the vendor of the technology, but also the user. I heard the infrastructure. Of course, you need the infrastructure, physical. Think about 5G, telecom, communications, data centers. Think about the digital infrastructure, databases, and others. And you need also the enablers, the brain of the artificial intelligence, for example. But I think that something that we have added on top of that investment process are two things. We want to have concentrated portfolios. We think the concentration, so after you have chosen the companies, you have to structure your portfolio. And we only select a handful of companies. How many? 30 companies on average. Why 30? Because there are many good companies. We want to have great companies, and there aren't that many. So we really want to focus on concentrating on our investments. And second, I think is very important, is deep knowledge on the technology. This is a fast-moving technology. You have innovations basically every day on the AI ecosystem. You need to be aware of who is developing the new technologies. You need to meet with companies in the private sector, startups, because they are developing the next generation of technologies. And I think that's important. And just to give you an example about my background, why did we start the first investment we did in the portfolio in 2018 when we launched the Echiquier Artificial Intelligence Fund was NVIDIA. Why? Because it was my Christmas gift every year since I was a kid. Graphical GPUs were used for graphics to play the latest video games. But of course, when you understand that the GPU uses a matrix-based approach, so highly parallelized computing, it's completely adapted to artificial intelligence. A lot of data, a lot of neurons, a lot of calculations that need to be done. Very simple. The basic algebra for artificial intelligence is A times B plus C. So it's very basic mathematics, but actually you do it in very large scale. So I will say that those are the key points in terms of how we have built the portfolio. But today, especially in 2023, as an asset allocator, as an investor, you have a major question to answer. What do you do about those Magnificent Sevens that are concentrating the performance, that are driving the markets higher? So I have two things to tell you. So first of all, you don't need to invest only on them, right? I mean, in our case, if you compare, the Nasdaq has about half, 50% of the index is invested on those Magnificent Seven companies. In our case, it's 25. So we have a 25% percentage points underweight to those. But we have other companies, Palantir, for example, Palo Alto Network in cybersecurities, which are doing the same or even better than the Magnificent Seven. So there are other opportunities. But the second point, which I also think is important, is that if you look back in history, years when the technological sector has concentrated most of the performance, so 80% or more of the performance of the S&P 500 that has been generated by the technological sector, has historically annunciated a tech bull market. And that's important because we need to understand that if this year the performance is very good on the tech sector, it is also because we are coming back from a high valuation period that corrected in 2022. We also have a tech recession. Growth on the tech sector is slowed down during 2022 because of many reasons. Just look at Amazon. Growth was 32% on the cloud business last year. This year it was 12%, so it decelerated. But where we are now, we are entering into an acceleration of growth in the tech sector. So if you think about the future, you have proven business models, a new technology that is being developed at the moment, artificial intelligence. You have valuations that are attractive relative to the growth, and you have an acceleration of growth. So this is really a Goldilocks environment. Just on top of that, let's add the interest rates that are finally started to plateau and coming back. This is the time to invest in technology, and especially in the forefront of technology, artificial intelligence.
Great. Well, there's a couple of things you mentioned in there that I think are very interesting to touch on. We still do have some time, but I would like to open the floor at some point for questions from the audience. But I'll just make sure, because you did mention, well, we can invest outside of these magnificent sevens. So I'll go with you, Jerome, and then I'll go with Johannes. But feel free to answer both of the answers of the questions if you want, which are, well, obviously, even though you mentioned other companies outside of the Magnificent Seven, many of the much of the focus is on America sometimes. So I was wondering, Jerome, where can we find opportunities in Europe? And then also for you, Johannes, or if you want to reply both of those questions, where we can focus on small caps. Are there opportunities outside of the massive capitalization?
Oh.
You go first, yeah.
I go first, okay. I'll speak about geographies then, because I think it's an important question that you ask about, Europe, where we stand on AI at the moment. And the short answer to that is, I'm afraid we're not very far. The long answer is that for the moment, yes, it seems that US companies and the US as a whole has quite a head start in artificial intelligence. Because, as was mentioned before, I mean, they have, through some of the usual suspect names, a very big, quite monopolistic position on the data hosting. They've got very powerful semiconductor names, which are at the moment at the heart of the AI process. So at the moment in Europe, we're not that far advanced. That doesn't mean that we don't have good companies. We do have some. You all know some of the big technology names in Europe, be it on the software side, like SAP, for example, or on the semi-equipment side, like ASML, etc. So some companies could be interesting from an AI perspective, but it looks to us like in the future we should probably see some more European companies interesting to our thematic, artificial intelligence, as adopters as well of the technology. This is probably where we will have some European company catching up quite fast, and as a result become very interesting investment opportunities. And this is especially true for our fund, because as I said, we invest in many sectors, not just tech, also outside of tech. So at the moment our fund is mostly like 85% invested in the US. This is probably a low point for Europe. We do have some Asian names as well. Probably if we have the same meeting in a couple of years' time, we should see the weight of Europe going higher than the current position.
Let's hope we do. But in that sense, I wanted to give you a chance.
I'm going to disagree with that just a little bit. Just because I focus on Europe, so that's all I do. It doesn't mean that I don't understand what's happening in the US, and I do appreciate what you said. And I think it depends how you measure. And if you're going to measure in market caps, okay, fine, I agree with you. But if you measure in opportunities, and for our funds, we only need 30 to 50 best ideas. And can we find 30, 50 best ideas in Europe that are going to benefit from this trend? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. I mean, there is this company that everyone keeps mentioning, NVIDIA. But NVIDIA cannot produce their supercomputers if they do not use the equipment from ASML. And so, that food chain part of it is very European. and the arms dealer. It's European, and obviously there's the US sanctions. You all heard about them. You know, they've impacted Europe massively, ASML and others. And so I think we are here in Europe, we're blessed with a certain number of companies that will benefit. I think the difficulty here from an investment point of view is to separate what you know and hear about AI on one side and the investment on the other side. And I don't see a lot of people doing that. So if you're approaching AI from an investment point of view as thematic and you just want to buy a basket of names and run with your children's savings, yeah, maybe you want to buy some US, mega caps and you're happy. But in stock picking and when it makes sense, when it makes sense to own ASML versus the sanctions versus the opportunity in AI, those things for stock pickers in Europe, I think offer an advantage because everyone's eyes, mind, and focus is in the US and not here in Europe. And I think that's an advantage. And maybe just one more point, because we're talking about harnessing AI, and just like you said, I agree with you, this is not technology, it's everything. And guess what? Everyone is focused on everything, but focused on US and tech when it comes to AI. So, bring that picture into, for example, the pharma sector in Europe, and I think it was mentioned by you, Johannes. And if you look at the pharma companies in Europe, they spend, for each drug, they spend 2.6 billion, that's the number, 10 years of research, and then they come and they lay the egg. Eventually, after 10 years, you've got one drug. That makes, very little sense. So actually, there is a vast opportunity for generative AI, for ChatGPT, for asking a question, for linking all this research that is produced daily and that researchers cannot get on top of just like that, because a clinical research note is a complicated thing, and it's like a researcher needs to sit down and read it. And there's thousands of them that are printed every day. So if you start using AI, you're going to accelerate, you're going to save. We've got some beautiful companies. I don't need to talk to you about Novo Nordisk. I'm sure you know what that drug does and how it helps diabetic people and helps obese people and helps cardiovascular issues as well. But think about AI from that angle as well. And I think, just like you said, you bring the engineer and you bring the investor. That's how we think about it as well. In our teams, we've got people that focus on verticals. We've got a guy who's a life science expert, and we've got a guy who's a fintech expert, and we've got a guy who focuses on energy transition. And guess what? ESG. That's a very, very challenging, complex problem to solve. If you throw in AI there and modeling what should be wind, what should be solar, how should we develop it, what kind of development plans we should have for H2 and so on. I think that's where the big opportunity is. And you want to capture it in Europe with a concentrated fund. It's different to that beta from the US. I get it. But there is an opportunity in this continent. And one more thing, very important.
Very, very shortly, though.
Very about Europe is that the ecosystem of startups here have been always a little bit underlooked. I think it's quite exciting because this GPT Turbo is really opening the book to everyone. Like your nephew could start a business on GPT Turbo. It's democratizing the innovation ability. And I demonstrated voice mode as a joke this morning because it was a very funny song from voice mode. This is a Spanish startup. Mm-hmm. It's dominating the music AI at the moment. I'm sure you've heard some AI music played around you in Spotify and what have you. But these are there is Synthesia. There is a dynamic and vibrant startup ecosystem here. And we'll see what comes out. But I think we have some, maybe not the trillion mega caps in Europe, but we have some exciting stuff here as well.
You did say you will see what comes out, and I did wanted to open the floor to audience questions. We're a bit short on time, so maybe we can do is, si alguien tiene una pregunta corta, la puede hacer, porque me gustaría que tuvieran una conclusión de dónde estamos en un año. No sé si alguien tiene una pregunta. Prefiero escuchar las conclusiones de ellos, un poco por abrir el público. Seguimos. Yeah, I was saying I wanted to ask a question, but also we're a bit short on time. So, because you did mention we'll see what comes out and we'll see where we are, and I would like you to use your last 5 minutes, each of you, if you can stick to just 1 minute, even though that's difficult, to see where will be at this same moment in mind, 2024, what we'll be discussing, you know? We'll start from there and we can just go. And yeah, what do you expect from the future in here?
Ok, súper. Bueno, pedí a Ulises si la última pregunta la podía responder en español. Es la lengua, el primer idioma que aprendí. Sí, en un año más arriba. Es decir, es como les decía hace unos instantes, el mercado lo veo muy positivo para el sector tecnológico. Obviamente hay otras circunstancias en otros sectores, más defensivos que se han vuelto muy caros, cíclicos que son muy caros, value que son muy caros. La tecnología está barata, entonces, ¿por qué no aprovechar esta oportunidad para invertir en sectores que tienen crecimiento a 2 cifras, que tienen visibilidad en su crecimiento, que están beneficiando de todos los desarrollos tecnológicos que estamos viendo con inteligencia artificial, con más datos, con eficiencias? Este no solo es el año de crecimiento para el sector tecnológico, es también el año en el que este sector va a tener mayor crecimiento de rentabilidad, de márgenes. Entonces, estamos en un sector idóneo. Las perspectivas me hacen muy atractivas y las empresas, las grandes, las pequeñas, las medianas, hay bastantes. Entonces, para mí, este es el momento de invertir. Estamos lejos de estar en una burbuja. El simple hecho que la gente diga, pero las valoraciones, pero ya subieron, es signo que aún estamos desafiando las valoraciones. No estamos en un episodio en el que todo el mundo dice, no, pues obviamente los ojos cerrados yo invierto, nada está caro. Ese sí será el momento de tener un poco de miedo. Entonces, estamos o en 1994, al comienzo de lo que va a ser un bull market tecnológico que tal vez acabe en exceso o una burbuja, o tal vez estamos en el 2002, después de la corrección tecnológica como pasó en el 2022, y de ahí pues va a seguir creciendo durante 20 años o más.
Perfect. Johannes, floor is yours.
It will be very quick. I mean, for me, in essence, there are 3 things to remember. First of all, AI and the AI industry is an unstoppable topic for the years to come. Despite any concerns about regulations and ethics, it will grow further and will open up tons of opportunities, specifically outside of technology. Technology is just the engine, but we will see more outside of technology. And ChatGPT probably was another iPhone moment for 2023 this year, and we will see more further implication also for 2024. I mean, we do have now the noise with Sam Altman, of course. That's very interesting, but it's just as a side note. We do think ChatGPT will have a tremendous impact on other industry sectors to come for 2024. We will hear more about this.
Amazing. Anis?
Yeah. So I would say I don't speak Spanish. I'm really sorry about that. But next year, I'll have pins here. It will be an AI device, and you'll be able to hear my voice speak in Spanish with immediate instantaneous translation. So that technology already exists, so hopefully next year it's roll out and I'll have it here. It'll be much cooler than me and my terrible English accent.
It'll be easier for me as well, so.
And it will be brilliant for you, because you'll be able to do it in Spanish as well, and I'll be able to hear you in English.
There you go.
And I think in 1 year time, you'll definitely have a technology that allows us to communicate different languages instantaneously. I think in 1 year time you'll have Netflix doing a series on Sam Altman's ousting from his company. It would be very fascinating to watch that plot. And I think we'll have AI devices. I'd be very surprised if we don't have them, anytime sooner than that. But by a year time, we'll have an AI device augment your smartphone, and it'll become a norm, just like going to ChatGPT now is a norm. And anyone can do it, your nephew can do it. So that's what I think will happen next year.
See how it goes, and then Jerome.
Well, I think if we meet in 1 year's time, I think we will have seen 3 topics that we will have discussed during the course of 2024. The first one is going to be regulation and governance of AI. I think what happened over the weekend is also a question of AI governance. I'm talking about what happened at OpenAI and Sam Altman being dismissed. Second thing, we'll probably see over the course of 2024 AI being increasingly visible in actual numbers in a much broader number of companies. So you will see X% of earnings or turnover in various companies being explicitly highlighted in financial reports. And third, I can surely make this bet that the vast majority of yours in any organization you'll be working right now with, you will see over the course of 24 some AI projects internally being launched, either to develop a new product or to make your work more productive. And those are projects that will be driven and basically forced upon you by top management of companies in order to gain efficiency and productivity. And I can surely see that we can compare various projects that we're going to see over this year.
Well, I'm sure everyone's taking notes and they'll ask for receipts next year. So hopefully we'll see you and we'll see who was right and who wasn't. But thank you everyone for coming. We can discuss the OpenAI drama on the afterwork, so you stay for that. And yeah, thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.